When my dad retired, I helped him build his dream cabin from the ground up, over $90,000 of my own money, no questions asked.
I thought I was investing in his happiness, in our bond.
But after he passed, I found out the truth. He left it all, the house, the land, everything, to his new wife and her dog.
I wasn't even mentioned in the will.
They told me I could visit, if the dog wasn't too anxious.
So I did something they didn't expect. I checked the deed. What happened next flipped everything upside down, and the story of how I took it all back went viral. Not out of spite.
Out of truth. When my dad retired, I thought he'd finally slow down. He'd spent his whole life working with his hands, carpentry, electrical, roofing, always moving, always building something. But what he really wanted, what he always talked about, was a cabin in the mountains.
Not a luxury lodge or some modern monstrosity. A real cabin.
Timber, stone, wood stove, maybe a creek out back.
That was his dream.
The year he turned 64, he told me, "This is it.
I'm gonna do it.
One last build before my knees give out." He had just married Sharon, my stepmom of 3 years. They met through a community garden club. She was quiet, a little distant, but she made him smile. I was happy for him, mostly. Problem was, dreams cost money.
And retirement didn't come with the payout he hoped for.
His pension was modest, and Sharon didn't work. She'd had some health problems, and Dad insisted she stay home, said she kept the peace. At the time, I had just gotten a major promotion, salary bump, bonuses, all that. I wasn't rich, but for the first time in my life, I had breathing room.
And honestly,
helping my dad build that cabin felt like the right thing to do.
He wasn't asking for it, but he was hinting.
He'd say things like, "The land's cheap up north, just need a down payment," or "Wouldn't it be cool to finally have that stone fireplace I always talked about?"
So one night, I said it. "Let me help."
He tried to refuse at first.
Said it was too much. But I pushed. I told him I wasn't doing it as a loan. I didn't want the money back.
I just wanted him to have his dream while he still could.
And that's how it started.
I wired the first $8,000 to help secure the land. A few weeks later, another $12,000 for the permits and foundation.
It became a pattern. Every couple of months, there'd be something else: lumber, insulation, windows.
We'd talk on the phone, and he'd send me little updates. Photos of the beams going up, the porch framing, the chimney stones he picked out one by one from a quarry nearby.
I felt proud. Not just of him, but of us. Like we were building something together.
I imagined myself visiting often, maybe bringing my future kids there one day. I pictured Christmases with snow and coffee on the porch. It wasn't just his dream. It had started to feel like ours. By the time the cabin was done, I'd wired over $92,000. I didn't keep track at first, but one day I sat down and tallied the transfers. It wasn't about the money, though. I was investing in his peace. His legacy. When he moved in, he called me and said, "You've done more for me than I ever deserved." That stuck with me. I visited twice that year. Once in summer, we fished in the lake and grilled steaks on a fire pit he built himself.
Sharon made peach cobbler.
The second time was in late fall, the trees were fire orange, and the air smelled like pine and chimney smoke. It felt like something out of a magazine.
But then life happened. Work got busy. I started dating someone seriously. Months passed.
We still talked on the phone, but I didn't make it up there again.
He never complained. No big drama. Just space.
If I'd known how fast things would change, I would have gone back sooner.
I would have asked more questions. Paid closer attention. But I didn't. And the next time I saw the cabin, he wasn't in it anymore. It happened in October. A phone call at 6:17 a.m. I don't remember the exact words, just the tone in Sharon's voice. Flat. Mechanical.
"Your father collapsed outside while splitting firewood.
Paramedics tried, but he didn't make it."
I sat on the edge of my bed for what felt like hours. I remember staring at the wall, thinking it couldn't be real.
Not him. Not like that.
My dad was the kind of man who never stopped moving. Who swung an axe like it was an extension of his arm.
He built homes. He was a home.
And just like that, he was gone. I flew up 2 days later.
Sharon picked me up from the airport.
She looked tired, pale, like she hadn't slept.
But she didn't cry. She just said, "He went fast. Didn't suffer." Then we drove in silence.
When we pulled up to the cabin, I felt a jolt in my chest.
It looked exactly like the photos. The wraparound porch. The heavy timber beams.
The stone chimney catching morning light.
It was beautiful. And painfully still.
Inside, everything was in its place.
Sharon had lit a candle and played some soft instrumental music.
His boots were still by the door. His coffee mug was in the sink.
The last newspaper was folded on the table. I touched it all, like if I held on to enough of his things, I'd feel him again. We had a small memorial. Just a few neighbors, a pastor, and me. No siblings. No extended family. It was quiet and strange, like watching someone else's goodbye.
That night, I sat by the fireplace with a whiskey and stared into the flames. Sharon was in her room with the dog, a scruffy little thing Dad never liked but tolerated for her sake. I remember thinking, I hope she's okay. I still felt protective of her. She was his wife, after all.
The next morning, we met with the estate lawyer in town. I wasn't expecting much. Dad didn't have stocks or savings or anything flashy.
I thought maybe there'd be a few tools, maybe the old truck. But then the lawyer said, regarding the property, the cabin and its contents have been left to Sharon, and her registered emotional support animal.
I blinked. Sorry, what? He repeated it.
I asked if there was a mistake, if maybe there was a clause, or a footnote.
Something. There wasn't. My name didn't appear once in the will. I looked at Sharon. She wouldn't meet my eyes.
She was busy petting the dog in her lap. Afterward, in the parking lot, she finally said, "He wanted me to have peace."
You already have your life. It was like a knife in the chest. I'd paid for that peace. Every board. Every nail. Every stone in the damn fireplace. Still, I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I just nodded and walked away.
I stayed one more night at a motel.
Not the cabin. She didn't offer.
And I didn't ask. I flew home the next morning, still trying to process it all.
Grief makes you foggy. I kept second-guessing myself, maybe this was what Dad wanted. Maybe he meant to thank me some other way. Maybe he just forgot to change the will. But in my gut, I knew better. I replayed every conversation we'd had during the cabin build. How I'd send the money, and he'd say things like, "This place is ours," or "One day, you'll bring your kids here."
He never once made it sound like it was hers.
Not entirely. I didn't expect ownership. I didn't need some legal title. But to be written out completely? Like I didn't exist? That stung deeper than anything. Weeks passed. Sharon never called. Never texted.
I sent one message just to say, "Hope you're holding up." She replied with a thumbs up emoji. A few months later, I tried visiting again. I wasn't sure why. Maybe I needed closure, or to feel close to Dad one last time. I texted her to ask if I could stop by.
She responded,
"You can come by for a short visit, but please give notice.
The dog gets anxious around strangers."
I stared at that message for a long time.
Stranger. That's what I'd become. To her. To the dog. To the cabin I built. I never replied. It sat with me like a bitter taste. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep right. I kept telling myself, it's just a house. Just money.
But it wasn't.
It was the last real thing I had with my father. The last thing we made together. Then one night, I couldn't shake this thought: did he ever finish the paperwork? So I started digging. I pulled up my email archives. I found the original land sale documents. My name was on them. Sole owner. I'd bought the land directly and transferred funds from my account. No joint agreement. No addendums. Just me. I went deeper. Property tax records. Surveyor's maps. Permit approvals. All tied to my name. Dad had said, "We'll finalize it later." I guess later never came. And that meant something important, something that hit me like a lightning bolt. The land the cabin sat on? It was still legally mine. I called a property attorney the next morning. Told him the situation. He reviewed the deed, the county filings, the receipts. His words were careful but firm: "You're well within your rights to revoke her occupancy. Especially if there's no lease, no transfer, and no written agreement." I sat with that for a week. Not out of revenge. Not out of anger. But because truth matters. I gave that money in good faith. I watched my father die believing he was building a family space. Not a private retreat for a woman who wouldn't even let me visit without dog protocols. So I filed the papers. Sharon was served 2 weeks later. The next day, she called me. I let it ring 4 times before answering. Her voice was venom. "You're disrespecting your father's wishes." I waited. Then said, "No. I'm respecting my contribution. You gave the house to a dog. I'm just taking back the land." Click. That was the last time we spoke. She didn't go quietly. Over the next 2 weeks, I got a barrage of texts, voicemails, even a certified letter, all saying the same thing in different words: that I was cruel, greedy, heartless. That I was robbing her of her home, dishonoring my father's memory, taking advantage of a grieving widow. I didn't respond. The lawyer advised me not to, and honestly, I didn't trust myself to stay calm. Because for all her theatrics, she still hadn't said a single word about the truth, about the money, about what I'd put in to make that place real. She spoke like I was an outsider stealing something sacred. Like she'd built that home with her own hands, slept in the cold before the walls were up, walked with Dad through timber yards and picked out countertops while juggling spreadsheets and transfers. But she hadn't. She'd made peach cobbler and picked out dog bowls. Meanwhile, I'd given up a down payment on my own home. I'd worked weekends. Delayed vacations. Sacrificed savings. Because I thought, this is for Dad. For his dream. For something that would last. And now I was being painted as the villain. But legally, the process was clean. The notice gave her 30 days to vacate. There were no legal protections for her since the land had never been transferred, and she wasn't a tenant, just an occupant. Still, part of me felt sick. I hated the idea of being someone's worst day. Even if they earned it. 3 weeks in, my lawyer called. "She's gone," he said. "Moved out yesterday." I didn't ask where she went. I didn't care. But then he added something that made me pause: she left the dog. I went back up that weekend. Drove 5 hours, heart pounding the whole way. When I pulled up, it was eerie. The cabin looked just like I remembered, but it felt hollow. Windows dark. Wind in the trees. The kind of silence that makes your ears ring. Inside, most of the furniture was still there. Couch, table, even the mattress. But no Sharon. Just the dog, curled up in front of the cold fireplace, looking up at me like it had been waiting. I stood there for a long time, unsure what to feel. I could have taken the dog to a shelter, I guess. But instead, I called a local rescue. A couple in their 50s came by that afternoon, said they'd been hoping to adopt a calm, older dog. They named him Barney. Promised he'd sleep on a real bed and get daily hikes. That night, I lit a fire in the hearth for the first time in 2 years.
I sat alone in the house I'd funded, in the silence my father once craved, and I let myself cry. Not just for him. Not just for what was taken. But for the version of me that kept trying to earn love through sacrifice. That guy was gone. And someone else, someone clearer, had taken his place. In the days after that visit, I made a decision. I wasn't going to move in. The thought crossed my mind, of course. I could have kept it. Made it my weekend retreat. Maybe even rented it out for income. But every time I thought about staying there, sleeping in that bed, cooking in that kitchen, I felt my throat tighten. The place was beautiful, yes. But it was stained. Not physically, emotionally. Every beam held a memory, and not all of them were mine anymore. So I called a realtor. She drove up 2 days later to take photos. Said the place would be easy to list, it was cozy but elegant, tasteful, and turnkey. I gave her full access, signed the paperwork, and told her to price it fairly. Not high, not low, just fair. She called me the next morning. I don't know what happened, she said, but your listing blew up overnight. The cabin's all over social media. People are calling it the betrayal house. Apparently, someone in her office had posted a TikTok about it. A home built by a son, lived in by a stepmother, and left to a dog. It hit a nerve online. People argued about inheritance law, family loyalty, grief, greed, justice. The story was vague enough to be debated, but raw enough to feel real. I didn't comment. I didn't feed the frenzy. I just watched the emails roll in. Offers. Lots of them. Most were from people who just wanted a viral trophy, a conversation piece. One guy offered above asking just to use it as an Airbnb and call it the doghouse. I ignored that one. But 4 days after the listing went up, we got a full cash offer from a couple in Denver. Quiet professionals. No gimmicks, no media obsession. They'd seen the cabin years ago on a hike and had always dreamed of owning something just like it. They loved the porch. The fireplace. The peace. We closed in less than 3 weeks. $384,000 wired into my account. I stared at the bank notification for a long time. It didn't feel like victory. More like vindication. Not because I got my money back, but because I finally stopped apologizing for caring too much. I took a portion of that cash and bought myself a 1-bedroom condo in the city. Small. Simple. Close to work. It had high ceilings, lots of light, and no ghosts. When I moved in, I bought myself one thing I'd never had, a brand new couch. I didn't overthink the price. I just picked something soft, something warm. I sat on it that first night, opened a beer, and put my feet up. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like someone's afterthought. I felt like a person who finally came home. Word about the sale spread quickly, at least in our little circle. Old friends, a few distant relatives, even some of Dad's buddies from the garden club reached out. Some just wanted the story, the gossipy details. Others genuinely wanted to know how I was holding up. I didn't have many answers for them. I told the truth, but I left out the ugliest parts. I didn't mention Sharon's messages, or the feeling of being erased. I just said, it worked out. I'm okay. Truth was, I was still untangling everything inside. Selling the cabin should have felt like closure, but all I felt was a kind of hollow relief. My dad was gone. Sharon had vanished. I never heard from her again, not even about the dog. The cabin, the dream, the family we might have been, all gone. I got the check, the condo, the new couch. I threw myself into work, into routines. Tried to build a life that didn't revolve around being the reliable one. But it's hard to shake old habits. I still checked in on the rescue a few times, just to hear about Barney. The couple sent photos, him curled up by a fireplace that wasn't mine, finally looking relaxed. That made me smile more than I expected. About a month after the sale, I drove up to the mountains one last time. I didn't go near the cabin, didn't even want to see it in someone else's hands. I just parked at a lookout, where the trees stretched out for miles, golden green in the afternoon sun. I sat on a flat rock and closed my eyes. Tried to picture Dad beside me, hands in his pockets, telling me to breathe that mountain air, kid. For the first time in a long time, I let myself miss him without any anger or regret. Just love, clean and aching. I realized then that I'd spent so much of my life trying to earn my place in other people's stories. Building, fixing, paying, sacrificing. Hoping that would be enough to make me unforgettable. But all it did was make me invisible to the people who only saw what I could give. I stayed on that rock until the sun dipped below the ridge. Then I drove home, windows down, air sharp and cold, feeling something settle in my chest. Not happiness, exactly. Not peace. Just the quiet that comes after a long, hard fight. And for once, that was enough. I wish I could say that after everything, I found some tidy lesson, some new family to fill the empty seats at my table. But the truth is quieter. After I sold the cabin and settled into my new condo, life shrank down to the essentials: work, a handful of good friends, quiet mornings with strong coffee. Sometimes I'd catch myself reaching for my phone, thinking of calling Dad just to tell him about my day, or a problem with the water heater, or how the city always smelled like rain at night. That ache never fully left. Maybe it never will. I didn't hear from Sharon again. No angry calls, no last-minute pleas, not even a thank you. For a while, I wondered if I'd done the right thing, if Dad would have understood. But when I looked at the facts, the money, the deed, the erasure, I knew I wasn't wrong. I just finally stopped pretending I didn't matter. A few months after the sale, the couple who bought the cabin sent me a letter. Handwritten, neat, and kind. They said the place brought them healing after their own loss. They'd kept the porch swing, rebuilt some garden beds, even found an old fishing rod in the shed and hung it over the mantel. They promised to take care of what I'd helped build. That meant more than I expected. I kept that letter. Sometimes, when I feel the bitterness trying to creep back in, I read it again. What I know now is this: family isn't just who shares your name, or who shows up in a crisis. It's who respects your effort, your boundaries, your place in the story. I spent too long showing up for people who opened the door only when they needed something. Now, I only let people in who value what I bring and who don't make me prove it over and over again. My father used to say, family is who shows up when it matters. I did. I showed up, paid up, built up, and cleaned up. I gave what I could, even when it hurt. And now I'm learning to show up for myself. No more begging for scraps of gratitude, no more building homes for people who'd never offer me a room. I have my own keys. My own place. My own peace. It's not the ending I wanted. But maybe it's the one I needed.